Resilience 101. Every year, millions of people around the world experience adversity, chronic stressors, traumatic events, but many of these people go on to survive, to recover, and show resilience. So, how do people recover from significant adversity, things like chronic stressors or trauma? What makes a difference in their lives? And then, how can we build resilience in the profession of social work? So these are some of the questions that we're going to focus on in the next 10 minutes in this presentation. Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer First. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Social Work at the University of Southern Maine in Portland. My research focuses specifically on identifying protective factors that support resilience for individuals experiencing community crisis or disaster events. So in the following presentation, I'm going to cover a brief overview of resilience and then discuss how we might be able to build it in the profession of social work. So I just want to begin with a very brief bit of background into resilience theory. It began in the late 1970s. Three main pioneers really began this theory. They were Norman Garmezi, Emmy Werner, Michael Rudder. They first started out studying children who had parents with severe mental illness or who were living in significant poverty. At the time, the medical model was very much predominant in the field. So most researchers were looking at the risk these children were exposed to, but these researchers found there was this subset of children who did show positive adaptation despite their environments. And they said, you know what, we want to study these children. We want to find out what made a difference in their life. When everything pointed to them having negative outcomes, what was it that helped them reach positive adaptation? And so they really changed the direction of mental health research by being interested in focusing on those protective factors and those processes over time. So what we've seen then over the years is that resilience has been built upon decades of research. It's made clear that human beings are able to overcome from significant adversity and problems and chronic stressors. It's gone through four major waves. The first was looking at describing who, what matters. Researchers thought that children were born with it, with resilience, or they weren't. And what they found over time in moving into that second wave was when they looked at understanding how it worked, they saw that the environment played a role, that protective factors played a role. And then so once researchers were able to describe who, what matters, and understand how, then that moved into looking at change. So how can we promote resilience? How can we build interventions? How can we make videos on Resilience 101 in order to promote resilience? And then the fourth and final wave is integrating. So how can we link across different levels and disciplines? How can we look at resilience at an individual level, but then also look at it at an organizational level or a school level? How can we promote it not only in a single student, but in a whole MSW cohort? That would be an example of integrating. So that's just a brief bit of background into resilience, how it began and how it's developed over time. What is it? What is a definition of resilience? So here's a brief summary. This is the definition I like to use. It's the ability of an individual or system to positively adapt in the face of stress, risk, or adversity. Sometimes we refer to this as bouncing back. So you experience something very difficult. Are you able to get back in there, get back to your baseline? Or some people like to look at it bouncing forward. So not only are you back at your baseline, but has going through a significant adversity, have you grown from that? And that would be an example of bouncing forward. So in terms of resilience model, usually it includes two fundamental criteria. You have to be exposed to risk, adversity, and then the individual system needs to be functioning effectively. And how then resilience works is protective factors, which are, I'm going to say a little bit more about in the next slide. Protective factors help buffer the risk factors or the negative outcomes, help buffer risk factors and negative outcomes. So let me just say a little bit more about that. Here is a slide that shows on the left side an example of risk factors and on the right side protective factors for, in this example, it's a child. So risk factors would be things like low self-esteem, poor language skills, poor physical health, while protective factors would be having access to, say, good physical health or having healthcare even, having an easy temperament. So I think it's helpful when you're trying to picture how does resilience work and you're thinking about risk factors and protective factors. I like to think about thinking of them like we have a scale. So on the left side, these would be stressors or those risk factors. And on the right side, protective factors. We're trying to balance out those things in our lives. So as our risk factors and stressors might change, so too our protective factors might be changing. But really the goal here is to balance those out, like is shown on the scale. So this then moves us to the question, in terms of social work practice, how can we build and sustain and enhance resilience in social work? Or as social workers, how can we build up our own resilience? So how I would define resilience in social work would be the capacity to positively adapt to adversity, stressors, or challenges we experience in the profession. So what are those challenges? Well, social work involves emotional labor, hearing and responding to other people's traumatic events and experiences. Some risk factors that we face would be challenges like we're in a high stress environment, we have workplace adversities, high caseloads, limited funding and resources. And all of these things can lead to things like vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, or burnout in the profession. So then what do? This brings us back to then the need of building resilience in social work. So what that looks like is, so the research is just beginning to emerge. It's definitely more recent in the last 10 years, I would say. But what we found is that resilient social workers, they've developed a repertoire of protective factors for different kinds of difficult situations. So again, thinking of that scale. And repertoire, I think it's helpful to think about that metaphor of a toolkit. So we often talk about toolkits, right? And social work practice and having different tools when we're working with clients. I think that developing a resilience toolkit of practical techniques and resources that would support your work when you're experiencing different kinds of difficult situations. That would be how we would begin by building resilience in social work. So the first step, I think, in terms of building that toolkit would be to take inventory of what protective factors and tools you may already have in that toolkit. So what's there? So when you have been listening to a client who've experienced severe trauma in their lives and you walk away from that, what are some of the ways that you have found have helped you to adapt positively? So maybe that would be an example, would be talking with a colleague or a supervisor about that experience. Maybe it's just getting out and walking and being able to just de-stress before you go home from work. Those would be examples of protective factors. So I would encourage you to think about what you already have there, and then also to think about what's missing. Are there certain areas where you haven't found a resource or protective factor to help balance those stressors in your life? So thinking about both internal and external protective factors. Internal are what's inside of you. External would be things outside of you. Internal would be like a problem-solving skills. External would be getting social support. So I want to leave you, I only have a few more minutes left, but I want to leave you with 5 protective factors that the literature has shown that can be helpful in the profession of social work. So the first one is supportive relationships. Develop those with the people around you, with your family, your friends, your neighbors, with your colleagues at work, or in school. Building these connections will support and enrich your lives every day. The second one would be stress management techniques. So in high stress environments, you have to find ways to manage your stress. And so some examples of those would be things like exercise, but then also doing something about that stress. So having good time management, I find, can be a really good, helpful stress manager. So finding what works for you in terms of being able to manage that stress. The third one is mindfulness and relaxation. So mindfulness really, a lot of research has found it's helpful in terms of just resetting. So by mindfulness, we mean being aware of the world around you, what you're feeling, what you're going through, also grounding yourself. So in terms of just looking out, what do you see, what do you hear, taking you outside of sometimes that stress that you're in, and reflecting on this, on positive experiences will help you appreciate what really matters to you in your life. The third one would be to keep learning, to be curious. So in terms of trying new things, so rediscovering an old interest, signing up for a course you've always wanted to take, finding different responsibilities at work if you're able to do, really just fostering that curiosity in your life, and that desire to just keep learning, keep getting better at what you're doing, because learning new things and mastering new things will make you more confident in your work. And then the final one that I want to mention would be the importance of having reflective supervision. And so what I mean by that is being able to find a safe and supportive environment to get support from, say, a mentor or supervisor to help you, especially in the early years of social work, to analyze your practice, and to help you think about the emotional impact it has on you, or how you're serving its users. But really, you need someone to help guide you through reflecting on your work, of what you're doing well, areas to improve, and really just finding that support and that supervision. So I just want to finish up. I just want to summarize. Social work can be both a rewarding and a challenging profession. So developing resilience can help us cope and adapt to those challenges. I would also like to just finish by saying, think about protective factors as those roots for a tree, to helping us grow into resilient social workers. Those protective factors are so key. And to think about balancing the stressors and challenges that you're experiencing in your profession with protective factors. Because with the right tools, things such as developing social support, finding stress management techniques, mindfulness, relaxation, continuing to learn new skills, and finding supportive supervision, these things can assist social workers in being better prepared to meet difficult situations and become more resilient and thrive. Thank you.